Hello, I'm Marguerite MacDonald, and this is Open House. Today we visit a little church that's bound up with one family's life for 6 generations.
I see a lot of ghosts. Now, believe it or not, I go to church and I can see the old people sitting in those pews like they were before.
Rougemont is a low-lying mountain 40 kilometers east of Montreal. On its slopes stands St. Thomas Anglican Church. The yellow wooden steeple of St. Thomas is a landmark among the acres of surrounding apple orchards. It was a century and a half ago, in 1847, that a settler named Robert Standish turned the sod and began construction of this small church for his community. Ever since, St. Thomas has played an important role in the lives of the Standish family. Today, there are very few people left in the congregation. They still gather for Sunday morning service, but the remaining Standishes know the church that enshrines so many family memories may not survive beyond this generation. Jane Georgie prepared this story.
Sunday morning service at St. Thomas Anglican Church in Rougemont. A dozen worshippers are scattered throughout the church today. The perfume of ancient candle wax and decades of incense cling to the pews. Sunlight pours in through the stained glass windows. It illuminates the dedications engraved on them long ago. Many of the names on the windows are the same as those of the people singing now. The congregation's hymn singing is accompanied by a unique barrel organ 150 years old. After the service, Marion Standish, the church organist, takes great pleasure in showing this instrument.
There's a hand crank that you must get organized and a foot pedal to pump the bellows. There are 3 wooden barrels with 10 tunes per barrel. And you choose your selection by moving the little lever here. And we could say maybe go to number tune. This is barrel number 1. And we could go number 5, which is Cambridge New.
Marion pumps the organ, work stops and turns a crank, filling the church with music from another era. This organ works much like a player piano and plays a selection of 19th century hymns. It's a source of pride to the Standishes who still live in Rougemont. The organ and the church provide a tangible link between the generations.
Okay. For me, it's my quiet time. It's my time of the week to renew myself. I don't tell the minister. I often don't concentrate at all on what she's saying as a sermon. It's time of reflection. I think often of people who have been here before. Florence Standish from Cookshire was an important person in my life. She used to come and tell me about how things had been in her time in the church. And I often go back to think of people who have been here before and what the future will be that we don't know.
Next to St. Thomas is the church cemetery. It's framed by a pair of weeping willows and enclosed by a cast-iron fence. Behind, climbing up the slope of Rougemont, endless rows of apple trees. Below, the Richelieu Valley. Old headstones form a muted pattern of gray and white.
This is Rebecca Standish. It's an old limestone stone that stands about 10 feet high, and the letters are starting to fade on it, and it dates September the 7th, 1875, and she was 95 years old.
John Standish is church warden.
She was one of the originals who came from Ireland.
John Standish bears the same name as the first church warden of 1848. And like his forebearer, today's John Standish looks after the church and cemetery.
You feel, I suppose, that your roots are deep here and the traditions, and it gives you a feeling of belonging and of association. You know, you feel it in the next generation as well, that there's some strange obsession, I guess, with the fact of being able to trace your family history, and even in this day and age, that attachment is still there.
Nearby are several patches of bare ground. This is where members of another generation of Standishes were recently buried. When anyone dies in the Standish family, the entire family gathers in Rougemont to grieve.
It's been a tradition in the family that everybody gets together, and not that it's a joyous occasion, but and there's those strong attachments that we just want to see that it's done right.
After church, John and Marion join a family gathering. It's at the home of Dorothy and Urban Standish, John's parents. Their house has been home to Standishes for generations, and Urban and Dorothy have spent their 55 married years here. Its thick stone walls resound with Standish voices exchanging news. In a corner of the kitchen sits Urban Standish in his comfortable rocker. He's the family patriarch. Urban is 90 years old now and rarely attends Sunday service. But he listens for the bell and looks forward to these after-church get-togethers. The whole family listens raptly when Urban speaks.
I had the job when I was 15 to do the wood firing and the cleaning of the church. Well, we used to have two big box stoves in the church in the aisle. So I used to go out there Saturday afternoon and put a big fire in, leave it there Saturday night, go in again Sunday morning, put a big fire in. And then after the church, we always had a night service. So I'd put a big fire in those stoves again. And when you talk about putting a fire in, you put in a whole lot of logs. Yeah, and you know, I got a big price of $6 a year. That was for cleaning the church, cleaning the chimney. They had lamps at that time. Sweeping the church, building the fire, bringing in the wood, bringing out the ashes, and ringing the bell.
Urban Standish remembers how when he was young, 60 people turned out every Sunday for services. Now they're lucky to get half as many. The time Urban has spent at St. Thomas is the story of his life. He relives it every time he goes to church.
Well, it's a funny thing to say, but I see a lot of ghosts. Now, believe it or not, I go to church and I can see the old people sitting in those pews like they were before. You know what I mean? With Edgar sat there, and Johnny sat there, and Carden sat there. It's just, well, I guess we live in our past, I think so.
The Standish family knows they will soon have to make difficult decisions about St. Thomas's future. There are so few of them left. Young ones are moving away. It's probably only a matter of time until Sunday services cease. Urban's son Colin wonders what will happen then.
I think it's going to fall on my generation's shoulders to decide what will eventually happen. Ancestors of mine helped start the church, and I'm going to be the generation to maybe decide its final disposition of it. I do kind of feel a little bit of the weight of responsibility of not to let something unrespectful happen to the property or the church eventually.
The St. Thomas Church is intertwined with the Standish family. It's their security, their history, their honor. For Urban Standish, it's not a simple matter of whether to keep on with Sunday services. Urban's fears for the future keep him awake at nights.
There's only one thing that worries me. When the church is closed, that it won't be pulled down, burnt down, or I don't like to see it there as a house or a garage, and that worries me more than anything else. I'd rather see it demolished. Now that bell that's there, that bell was sent over here by a little community in England that picked up enough money to send the bell here to put in our church. I think that bell should be put on a monument for the church. You know what I mean? When the church is finished, demolish the church, put the bell up on the property where the church was. Well, I don't know. It's a memory that you can't forget.
For Open House, I'm Jane Georgie in Rougemont, Quebec.